Today's daf is daf Vav, and we got up to Vahashta. We'll count down from the top of daf Vav, and I'll just review the top of daf Vav outside Oisavinik. We count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down from the top of the Omud on daf Vav Hamin Aleph, and the last word in the line is Vahashta. The Gemara is trying to establish that the animals that were brought into the Teva by Noach, those that were allowed in, were capable of reproduction after the Mabul. And that would exclude an animal that's a treifa, according to one Mandiomar, who says, as we saw on the bottom of Daf Hamid Beis, that treifa enioledis, a treifa cannot procreate. And the Torah says that God gave a command to Noach, lachios Zara, that the animals should be able to procreate. But the Gemara on the top of Daf Vav, as we saw yesterday, is bothered according to the Mandiomer that says that Treifa Yoledes, and therefore the pasuk that says lachios Zera would be fulfilled even if the animals brought into the Teva were treifa. So we need now another source to prove that the animals brought into the Teva would not include treifa. So treifa was disqualified. And that we're going to learn from the word itach. And when Hashem says to Noach, itach, take these animals with you, we're going to darshan that word itach means bedomalacha, meaning just like you're not a treifa, so too the animals should not be a treifa. And the Gemara now asks, how do we know that Noach was not a treifa? And the answer is because it says ish tamim hayabedorsav, and tamim means shalem as opposed to a treifa, a healthy person. The Gemara suggests the counter argument that maybe tamim is only a reflection on his moral character. And the Gemara says, well, we don't need the word tamim to reflect his tmimus in spirituality because it says ish tzaddik, so we already know he's a tzaddik. So why add the word tamim? And the answer is that the word tamim teaches you that he was not a treifa, and then the word itach is going to teach me that the animals that went into the teva likewise were not treifos. The Gemara then again counter-argues and says that maybe we need both tamim and tzaddik to describe the spiritual qualities of Noach. And the difference being is that the word tamim refers to the ways of his life, meaning the way he behaves in his life, his character. And the word tzaddik refers to his maisim. So the Gemara says that's impossible. Because if you're going to raise the possibility that Noach himself is a treifa, then since the Torah says itach, which means kavosech, they should be like you, that would mean that all the animals would have to be a treifa like Noach. That's not even a possibility. So now we're up to where we left off yesterday, v'hashta, denafka lemi itach. Now that the word itach will teach me that just like Noach is not a treifa, so too the animals are not a treifa, is lechayos zera lomali. We use the command of Hashem lechayos zera to teach me the exclusion, the disqualification of animals that were treifa. Now we don't need that anymore because we have it from itach, which means domek kavase. So the Gemara says, ima itach, if I only had the word itach, hava mina litzavsa bi'alma. What the Torah means is that take animals into the teva that will continue to live and persevere and afford kind of like literally a company. They'll be your company, Noach. But what it really means, I think, on a deeper level is that Noach would be dedicated to, the well-being of the animals and that would sort of distract him from what was going on around the earth and the mabul that was affecting, right outside the teva. And therefore, when the Torah says itach, it means litzavta. Litzavta means to be your companions, or as we said, to occupy your mind and distract it from what's going on in the world of destruction. Now, supposing the animal is a treifa, the animal who's a treifa is going to die within a short amount of time. And Noach is going to spend quite a bit of time in the teva, and he needs the animals as companions, so therefore treifa would be excluded. And ve'afilu zokin ve'afilu saris. That would mean that if the animal is not a treifa, then it's not going to die immediately if it's a zaken, an older animal, or a sterile animal, even though those animals probably will not be able to procreate. And therefore, Kasav Rachman, I need the pasuk lahachyo zara. And lahachyo zara now is going to exclude the zakenim and the serisim, the animals that were sterilized, so that we can guarantee that the animals would be able to procreate when they came out of the teifa. So we need both itach to exclude treifa, but the exclusion of treifa would not necessarily be understood to mean because the treifa cannot procreate, because there is a man who says that treifa could procreate, but rather we would understood that the treifa exclusion is only because these animals would die prematurely. Now I need lahachyo zara to teach me that any animal, even if it could live for a long time and accompany Noach throughout the time in the teva, but nevertheless it is incapable of procreation, and it's not lahachil zara, and therefore it's excluded from the teva. So I was just thinking out loud, if let's say I wanted to go into the teva, maybe they would say, listen, Berzon, you're too old to go into the teva. They would exclude older people because of lahachil zara. Although a male could procreate even at an older age. Apparently by the animals, once they reach a certain age, they can't procreate. In any event, at this point, we're finished with that discussion, and we go on to discuss the Mishnah. Now, to discuss the Mishnah, we again repeat what we've said in the past about Yomi Dehem. And a Dehem means two things. Number one, it means idol worship. And number two, a Dehem means those days that are prohibited by rabbinic decree from business transactions with the goyim, with the idol worshippers, because of their celebrations, the idolatrous celebrations. So Yom Deim is referring to their festivals. Yibaylahu. The Gemara asks the following. The Mishnah establishes that already 3 days before a Deim, before their official festival, we are enjoined from entering into business transactions with the idol worshippers. Now, how do you understand 3 days? Shlosha yomim hein ve'edehem, which would mean the following, that the number 3 days is the totality of all the days that are prohibited from business transactions with the idolatrous, meaning that the festival day itself plus another 2 days calculated together leads you to 3 days. Odilma, or should we say no, Hain, the 3-day period, below a day, meaning in addition to the festivals, which would mean that the prohibition against entering into business transactions with the idol worshippers begin 4 days in advance. And this is a question that the Gemara vacillates about, and it's going to occupy our minds here in the sugya for quite a while. Toshma. First, we want to quote the Mishnah itself. Now, again, the Mishnah that we're quoting now is a Mishnah a little bit later on. We're about to get to it, not today, but maybe tomorrow. And the Mishnah says the following. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, Shlosha Lifneim uShlosha Lachreim Os. Whereas the Rabbanon are of the opinion that the prohibition of business transaction only is before a Dayhem, Rabbi Shmuel has a 3-day prohibition even after a Dayhem. So you've got 3 days before their holidays and 3 days after their holidays. Now, look at the language of Rabbi Shmuel. He says lifnehem and la'achrehem. And the Gemara thinks that from that language we can mamish prove whether or not the Yom Ha'edehem is included or not, because Isal Kedatachem Ve'edehem, if you're going to say that the number 3 includes not only the days before, and now according to Rabbi Shmuel, even after, but also the Eidehem, the day of the festival itself, which means total of 2 days plus 1 is 3 days, is then the Gemara says the following. Rabbi Shmuel, Yom Eidehem chashav lehu me'ikara v'chashav lehu basof. This is very strange. You cannot count a day twice, once for Lifnehem and again a second time for Lachrehem. So if we're going to assume that the 3-day period includes a Dayhem, then according to Rabbi Shmuel that it's also Lifnehem and Lachrehem, then what you're going to do is you're going to count the Yom Ha'eder as twice. It's going to be included in the 3 days of Lifneim and in the 3 days Lachrehem, which makes no sense at all. How could Rabbi Shmuel take the Yom Ha'edehem and calculate it both Lifneim and Lachrehem? And therefore, we have a clear-cut proof that the Yom Ha'edah stands on its own, and the calculation of 3 is in addition to the Yom Ha'edehem. So you've got, according to Rabbi Shmuel, the 3-day period before Yom Ha'edehem. You've got the 3-day period after Ha'edehem, plus the Yom Ha'edehem in the middle, all told 7 days. Gemara rejects it. You know why it says that language? That's only to maintain the literary symmetry of the Mishnah. Aidi detana shlosha lifnehem. Since Rabbi Shmuel mentions the 3 days beforehand, which include the Yom Ha'edehem, so you've got 2 days plus 1, and then Tananami Shlosha Lachrehem, you've got now the 3 days afterwards, which, again, what the Gemara is now maintaining is that we are not going to count the Yom Ha'edehem as we thought before, because if we're going to count the Yom Ha'edehem, then we have the paradox of Yom Ha'edehem being calculated twice. So we're going to have to calculate 3 days on its own, 3 days afterwards on its own as a separate unit, and then the Yom Ha'edehem in the middle. Tashma, the Gemara tries another proof. The Omer of Tachlifa Barav Dimi Omer Shmuel, Yom Rishon, okay, this is a statement of Shmuel, Yom Rishon L'divrei Rebbe Shmuel Li Olam Asur. Now, let's understand that the word Sunday means sun day, which means it's the day that the sun worshippers worship as a holiday in honor of the sun. The sun is the deity. I found it quite interesting historically that in this footnote here, he's got a list of those pagan cultures that worship the sun. It's an unbelievably long list. The Egyptians, the Indians, the Asian Indians, the American Indians, the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Japanese, the Greeks, the Romans. Wow. All of these worshipped the sun. And therefore, Sunday, right, the first day of the week, is obviously like a holiday, because that's the main day that they worshipped the sun. And according to Rabbi Shmuel, says Shmuel, you're not going to be able to do business with the pagans, according to Rabbi Shmuel, both the 3 days before Sunday and the 3 days after Sunday, which basically means it covers the entire week. So let's say, for example, in Bavel, the Babylonians were sun worshippers, and therefore you can't, according to Rabbi Shmuel, enter into transactions with the pagan Babylonians the entire week, because you got the 3 days before Sunday and the 3 days after Sunday plus Sunday, you end up with 7 days. But if you're going to whittle it down from 3 days to 2 days, because the number three includes even the Yom Deim, so then you basically have 2 days before Sunday. You got 2 days after Sunday. It doesn't cover the whole week. You're going to end up with Friday and Saturday as 2 days before Sunday. And then you have Monday and Tuesday. But Wednesday, Thursday, I'm sorry, Monday, Tuesday. But Wednesday and Thursday would not be included. You have three. No. You have 2 plus 1. Then you've got again 2 plus 1. But you can't count that one twice. So you can end up with 2 plus 1 plus another 2, because you can't count plus 1 on the other side, Achreim. So you're left with 5 days. And therefore, Shmuel's opinion that the entire week is included in the Easter transactions, according to Rabbi Shmuel, because of the sun worshippers, it's not true. And that's what the Gemara says, Wednesdays and Thursdays will be mutter, because Wednesdays and Thursdays are not within the 2 days before, nor within the 2 days after. So the Gemara says, you know what? I'll leave it to Rabbi Shmuel. You're right. You've absolutely convinced me that according to Rabbi Shmuel, Hein velo edeim. It means 2 days plus the Yom edeim. I'm sorry. Did I say 2 days? I'm sorry. I apologize. I meant to say 3 days plus the Yom edeim, which basically gives you 4 days lifneihem, including the Yom Ha'eda, plus the 3 days afterwards, and that covers the whole week of 7. Ki kami boile, but our suffix, it revolves around I'll leave it to Rabbanan Mai. According to Rabbanan, what do they have in mind when they talk about Shlosha? Does the Shlosha Yomim include the Yom Ha'eda, and then it's really only 2 days? Or no, it's Shlosha Yomim in addition to the Yom Ha'eda, 4 days. Amar Avina Tashmar, let's learn it from the Mishnah. He tells you here that the Mishnah is on Daf Ches. So if today is Monday, we'll get to that on Wednesday, Mitzvah Shem. Okay, now we're going from Babylonia to Rome, and we're going to use a lot of Roman words that refer to their various idolatrous holidays that all seem to revolve around the Tkufa. The Tkufa is called the winter solstice. Again, we'll have to wait until we get to Avches to really understand what brought the idol worshippers to put so much significance on the Tkufa, on the winter solstice, and 8 days before and 8 days after. In any event, what are the names of their holidays? Number 1, Kalendra. And the Gemara is going to go through each one of these to explain what they are. Number 2, Stanver Nura. Number 3, Kartesim. And V'yoma Rav Chanin Bar Rava, Kal Nida. What is the celebration of Kal Nida? That's Shmoni Yomim Achrat Kufa, whereas Sadan Nura is Shmoni Yomim Lifnei Kufa. So again, we're talking about the 8 days after following the winter solstice and the 8 days before the winter solstice. V'simonech, and to remember this, that we include both the days before and the days after the winter solstice, we remind ourselves from a pasuk in Tehillim, which says, Achar v'kedim tzartanu. So it's Achar, which means afterwards, Keda means beforehand, and we have the 8-day period afterwards and the 8-day period before. Oh, now what's the proof? That if the number 3 includes both the day of the festival plus the other 2 days, so there's only 2 days beforehand, is then a sorahavi. Right? We're going to add 2 to 8 and we get 10. Now the Mishnah says 3. So let's understand. If the number 3 is in addition to the holiday, the festival, which means total 4, then we can justify the first Mishnah that opens up Masechet Avoda Zara and mentions 3 days. It's always going to be 3 days. So you decide what the Yom HaEdah is, and in the case of these Roman idolaters, it's going to be 8 days of celebration before, 8 days celebration afterwards, and then you add 3 days before. It's always standard uniform going to be 3 days. But if, on the other hand, you're going to go with the other approach, that a dayhem includes the day of the festival itself, that's also included under a dayhem. So you add 2 to 1, and there are only 2 days beforehand. Then you have to calculate the 8 days together with the 2 days beforehand, and it ends up with 10 days. So again, it's not going to be standard 10 days. It'll always depend upon how many days of celebration and festivities they have. But in this case of Kaldra, etc., where they had the 8-day celebration, you're going to add 2 days, and it's 10 days. So how could the Mishnah say that it's always 3 days? The Mishnah implies that it's an absolute rule of 3 days. Well, it works out very well if you hold that the 3 days are in addition and external to the celebrations. It's always going to be 3 days. How long are the celebrations? That'll shift. But you're always going to prohibit the transactions 3 days before the celebrations. Gemara rejects it. Tana kula kalnida chad yomahu dechashiv. This is very strange lumdus. The Gemara is saying that the 8 days of festivities, in the case of a calendar because of the Tkufa, is considered in the eyes of the Tana as 1 day, because it's all collapsible. It's 1 day of celebration for the sun, the solstice. And therefore, the Mishnah is absolutely justified by saying 3 days. Now 3 days becomes standard because it's going to be the one single day, which is really comprised of 8 days, 8 times 24 hours, right, of celebration, of holiday, plus another 2 days. Omar Avashi Toshma, I have a proof. And this is our Mishnah at the beginning of Avoda Zara. It says lifnei, underline that word lifnei. Lifnei eideyem shall ovdei kakam shloshi yomim. V'isal kedaitachein ve'eideyem. Lisnei eideyem shall ovdei kakam shloshi yomim. I'm going to prove to you, says Rav Ashi, from the language of the Mishnah, that the 3-day period is external to the day of celebration, meaning in addition to, so it's 3 plus 1. And how do I prove that to you? From the word lifnei. Because if you're going to tell me that it's 2 days plus a day, leave out the word lifnei. Just mention 3 days. And that 3 day will include the 2 days before plus the festival itself. And if you'll reject my proof, says Rav Ashi, Haidiktani lifnei eidehem. The word lifnei is there, limu'ute li'acher eidehem. In other words, maybe we're coming to exclude the Shita of Rabbi Shmuel, and therefore we emphasize and add the word lifnei to tell you that there's no prohibition of transactions following their festival. Is lifnei? Why didn't the Mishnah say Edom shalov dekacham shal shiyamim? Which again means, 3 days plus lifnehem, el shmamino, hein below edeim shmamino. This is the final proof. The Gemara comes to the conclusion that it means hein below edeim, meaning add 3 days to the day of edeim. Iboilu, the Gemara is a suffix. Mishum harvacha o dilma mishum lifnei ivel ositim mishum. Why did the Chachamim prohibit business transactions before and during the celebrations of the idol worshippers? 2 possibilities. One is harvacha. Harvacha means that the idol worshiper feels that by doing business with the Jew, he gets benefit. Now, that might mean if he sells to the Jew, he gets money. That makes him happy. And if he buys from the Jew, even though he's paying for it, but maybe that also makes him happy. That's a little bit more, the buying is a little bit more tricky. So notice, Larvacha has nothing to do with karbanos, with sacrifices for the idols. But the second approach, means that you're selling animals to the idol worshippers before their celebrations when they bring their sacrifices. You are abetting in a crime. You're making it easier for the goyim to have the animals that they need in order to bring their sacrifices. And the chiddush of this Gemara is that the prohibition of lifnei iver applies not only vis-a-vis another Jew, that you're not allowed to bet in his crime and make it easier for him to giving him treifa to eat, but it also applies vis-a-vis a guy with regard to the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, one of which is Avoda Zara. Now, all the Mefarshim here raise the following question. The Gemara now is going to ask L'may nafkamina. And the Gemara is going to go through a very complex nafkamina. Why does the Gemara have to do that? There's a simple nafkamina. If you're selling sheep or other animals to an idol worshiper before his celebration, then that's lifnei iver. But if you're selling him other utensils, for example, or anything that's not an animal that can be brought as a sacrifice, then there's no lifnei iver. There is harvacha. Maybe he's very happy to purchase your piano because he's a piano player, whatever it might be. And this is a pella. Why the Gemara asks the question l'may nafkamina. I'm just mentioning the question. And the Gemara answers the islay behema l'dideh. What happens in a case where the idol worshiper has his own flock of animals? He doesn't need your animal to supply a sacrifice for his mizbeach. But harvacha there is. It's very nice that he buys your animal and he has an extra animal in his corral and he makes money off of it. But now, this opens up a very fundamental question, which the Gemara is going to now analyze about the nature of lifnei iver. For example, let's say I have wine. The Nazir is not allowed to drink wine, but he has plenty of wine in his stockpile. Am I enjoined from giving him wine when he could violate his Isur on his own? He doesn't need me. So Gemara says, V'chi islay, are you going to tell me that since he has his own animals, that's called islay l'dideh, lo avra mishum lifnei iver michshal? Makes sense. I didn't help him or facilitate his crime of bringing an animal for sacrifice. He has plenty of animals. Says the Gemara, that's not so. V'asanya,